Welcome back to BBC News. The first former US president to face criminal charges, Donald Trump has for much of 2024 faced 4 simultaneous prosecutions. The allegations ranged from his attempt to cover up a hush money payment to porn star Stormy Daniels, that was during his 2016 campaign, to his attempts to overturn his 2020 election defeat. Now, President-elect, what does this result mean for those legal cases? Let's speak to Joseph Moreno, former federal prosecutor and national security analyst. Very good to see you. Thank you for once again joining us, Joseph, here on BBC News. Before we get to those cases, your thoughts on the election result?
Well, Lucy, as an American, regardless if I feel like who you wanted to win, I think we should all take a breath of relief, a sigh of relief, and just be happy that things have been peaceful, that we have what appears to be a decisive election last night. I don't think we'll have any legal battles. I don't think we'll have any accusations of cheating, anything like that. It seemed like a good, clean election. So I think that's a wonderful thing right off the bat. And hopefully, as your previous guest said, we can start the process of healing now. It has been a nasty, nasty campaign season. I hope Donald Trump is true to his word about bringing the country together. And I think we have a tremendous opportunity here to kind of put a lot of that bad behind us and start fresh.
Joseph, can you just take us through, though, these criminal cases that Donald Trump faces and what happens now?
Right. So now that the campaign is behind us, we actually have to get back to the fact that there is all of this legal drama still hovering over Donald Trump. So what happens next? The first one is in 3 weeks, he will be sitting in a courtroom in New York City facing a possible sentencing in the Alvin Bragg case regarding fraud. Now, he's supposed to be sentenced on that day by Judge Merchan. But prior to that, remember, Judge Merchan has to rule on whether or not this case should be dismissed based on the Supreme Court's immunity ruling from earlier this year. That's the path of least resistance. Judge Merchan can say, look, there's enough of a question here about the evidence used at the trial that the conviction should be thrown out. That would basically end the case. Technically, Alvin Bragg could bring it again if he wanted to. I doubt that would happen. But let's say we go ahead. Let's say Judge Merchan says, you know what? The conviction stands. I'm going to sentence Donald Trump now. Anything could happen. He could be house arrest. It could be a fine. It could be theoretically jail time. Now, Trump is a first-time offender. It's a nonviolent crime. And the fact that he's president-elect, I really hope that we avoid something like that. But technically, it's on the table.
Yeah, Joseph, I just have to interrupt here because I'm sure this is something that people are typing into Google, actually. Can a U.S. president do the job from a jail cell?
Well, if that were to happen, remember, he doesn't take office until January 20th, right? So the likelihood that he'd be sentenced to jail for such a long period that it would go almost 2 months into January is extremely unlikely. And talk about a political firestorm that would cause. So again, I hope we don't get that. If we do, it's a whole number of questions that we'll be Googling for some time.
Can I ask you about the Supreme Court decision around immunity and the fact that we've had quite a few Democrats already on the program today say they're really worried that now there aren't the guardrails that used to be in place when it comes to how a president can behave. Can you just unpick that for us and what that means?
Yeah, I think the hysteria around that is really misplaced. I think that if you look at the majority decision carefully, what you'll see is that it says if the president is carrying out his or her duties and is making decisions in the performance of what's lawfully permitted in the office of president, they can't be second-guessed legally. It does not give them this sort of free option to do illegal things.
So just to be clear, it does not provide absolute immunity.
Exactly. The president can't just start misusing the military to arrest people domestically or spy on Americans, because those things are not within the purview of the legal duties of the president. So the idea that it's this free pass to do all kinds of crazy illegal things, that was never the case. It is not the case. Hopefully we don't have to test that decision, but I don't think that the kind of mania that followed it was ever justified.
Can we also, since we've got a little bit of time, just get to the Georgia election interference case, which I think was due to come to trial in 2025, next year. What's the status of that?
Right. So, Lucy, that's the Fulton County, Georgia case brought by prosecutor Fani Willis. Now, that case has had all kinds of problems, many of which were self-imposed by Ms. Willis herself. The prosecutor, Nathan Wade, was thrown off because of an improper relationship. It came out that he really was not qualified to prosecute a RICO case, which are traditionally very complicated. Then the case got thrown off track in terms of whether or not it might even be dismissed. So at this point, theoretically, it's still alive, and theoretically, Fani Willis could still pursue it. If she does, and if she tries to bring it back on track, what will happen is it will trigger something called the Supremacy Clause in the Constitution, which is a very basic concept that says federal law is dominant over state law. And while it's never been tested, I think that the Supreme Court would find easily that the responsibilities of the president cannot be overtaken by a state prosecution. The worst that could happen would be any case would be put on hold until Donald Trump is out of office. And then whether or not they still want to pick it up against a person who's now 82 years old, I think that would be a stretch. So basically, I think that case is dead.
Joseph, it's always great to get your expertise. Thank you so much for joining us.